The station's gravity coughed once, then settled into a reluctant imitation of normalcy, the kind that made knees ache and reminded everyone aboard that this place had been assembled by committees rather than gods. I was standing exactly where I had been ordered to stand, which was never a comforting sign. Orders that specific usually ended with either medals or funerals, and I had learned not to bet on the shinier outcome. The summons had arrived 3 minutes earlier, delivered by a hovering diplomatic drone shaped like a polite mistake. It had actually bowed, then projected a sigil I didn't recognize but instinctively disliked. After that, it informed me I was requested, not ordered, which was somehow worse. Requested meant politics. Politics meant no weapons, no backup, and a lot of smiling while imagining where the nearest airlock was. I checked my reflection in the viewport and decided I looked like someone who had survived too many wars to be impressed by another invitation. That would have to do. The chamber I was led into had been sealed for centuries before being repurposed as neutral ground. Neutral ground always belonged to whoever had the sharpest lawyers or the longest memory. I suspected this meeting involved both. The doors sealed behind me with a sound like a verdict being finalized. She was already there. She stood when I entered, which I noticed because I hadn't expected courtesy from someone whose species had once tried to turn my home sector into a blood-powered reactor. She looked human enough that my instincts hesitated, then recalibrated. The differences were subtle but impossible to ignore once seen. Ears long and elegant, tapering upward and back like deliberate evolutions rather than deformities. Eyes that caught the light and returned it slightly delayed, as if deciding what version of reality to acknowledge. Her posture suggested patience sharpened into a weapon. "You are the warrior," she said. I considered correcting her. I had a name, a rank, a service number longer than some wars, but none of that mattered here, so I nodded. "I've been called worse." A pause, then a faint curve of her mouth. Not quite a smile, more like a test run. "Humor under stress," she said. "The archives were accurate." "That's comforting," I replied. "I hate disappointing archives." She gestured toward a table that hadn't existed until she wanted it to. Matter reconfiguration always made my teeth itch. I sat anyway. If this was an execution, at least it was a seated one. She remained standing, which felt intentional. Predators liked height. Politicians liked dominance. She was probably both. "My name," she said, "is irrelevant for now." "Great," I said. "I'll call you. This is probably above my pay grade." That earned me an actual smile. Sharp, quick, gone. "You may," she said. "I have called you here because the survival trajectories of our species have intersected." I leaned back. "That sounds expensive." "It will be," she agreed. "And controversial and statistically improbable." "Those are my favorite kinds of conversations," I said, "usually right before someone starts shooting." "No one will shoot," she said calmly. "This station forbids it." I tapped the table. Stations forbid lots of things. Violence usually just gets creative. Her eyes flicked to my hand, then back to my face. "You are stalling." "I prefer warming up." "Very well," she said. "I will be direct." I braced myself for threats, ultimatums, perhaps a declaration of renewed war. I had responses prepared for all of those. None of them involved what she said next. "Will you have children with me, warrior?" The silence that followed was not dramatic. It was logistical. My brain began sorting through possible interpretations, translations, cultural metaphors, and potential poisons in the air. None of them made the sentence less ridiculous. "I'm going to assume," I said slowly, "that there's a cultural context I'm missing, possibly several." "There is," she said, "but the meaning remains." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out loud, sharp, and entirely inappropriate. "You aliens really need to work on your opening lines. Maybe try hello next time." She waited. That patience again. Vampire patience, I remembered. Long-lived species learn to let others exhaust themselves. "Your species," she said, "is resilient, adaptive, and catastrophically stubborn. Ours is efficient, enduring, and declining. Our projections indicate extinction within 5 centuries without genetic divergence. And you read those projections and thought, I should ask a tired human soldier to solve this with his reproductive system. Yes, I rubbed my face. I don't even know your favorite color. Blood spectrum crimson, she said instantly. Then after a pause, this is a joke. We do not have favorites. Right, I said, of course. She finally sat, folding herself with deliberate precision. You are not being chosen at random. Somehow that makes me feel worse. You are a warrior who has refused extermination orders, she said. You have disobeyed commands that would have ensured human survival at the cost of moral collapse. You are statistically anomalous. I prefer difficult. Our species requires more than compatibility, she continued. We require defiance. Our offspring must be able to stand between civilizations and refuse both. I stared at her. So this is about kids as a peace treaty. Children are the only treaties that cannot be easily broken, she said. That's disturbingly poetic. I have been accused of worse. The station hummed around us, ancient machinery pretending it wasn't listening. Somewhere far away, stars bent their light around invisible dangers. I thought of command, of my bunk, of the quiet dream where the war finally ended, and no one asked me to decide the fate of anyone ever again. You could have asked a diplomat, I said. We did, she said. They attempted to negotiate royalties. Yeah, that tracks. I exhaled. You realize saying no is still an option. Yes, she said, but not without consequence. Of course. She leaned forward slightly, not threatening, intimate. This is not about romance, warrior. It is about continuity. I met her gaze, and what if I say yes? Her long ears twitched just once. Then history becomes complicated. I snorted despite myself. It already is. For the first time since entering the chamber, I felt something unexpected beneath the weight of politics and extinction curves and impossible offers. Curiosity. And that, I knew, was far more dangerous than fear. The corridor outside the chamber felt longer than it had on the way in, which I suspected was the station's subtle way of encouraging reflection or panic. Possibly both. I walked because standing still seemed like it would invite another hovering drone with a contract or a syringe. My communicator buzzed exactly once. The universal military signal for command wants to pretend this is casual. I ignored it. If the universe was going to ask me to consider interspecies offspring, it could wait an extra minute. The station lights shifted as I moved, adapting to my gait, my temperature, my uncooperative mood. Somewhere deep in the hull, old alien systems argued quietly with newer human patches, a technological marriage held together by firmware updates and mutual resentment. I respected that. It felt familiar. I turned a corner and nearly collided with a maintenance android hauling a crate labeled bioenergy. Do not sip. The android paused, processed my existence, and stepped aside with exaggerated politeness. Long day, I asked it. Statistically ongoing, it replied, then trundled off. That was about right. I found a seating alcove overlooking the station's inner ring, where traffic moved like lazy thoughts. I sat, stared, and tried to catalog my life decisions in chronological order, hoping to find the one that had clearly led to alien-vampire marriage proposal adjacent. No luck. It all seemed to flow naturally from enlisted young to survive too much to now this. My communicator buzzed again. This time I answered. Report, command said, using the voice that meant they were pretending not to panic. She asked me to have children, I said. Silence. Then repeat. With enthusiasm, I said. She asked me to have children. Another pause, longer this time. I imagined a room full of officers suddenly wishing they'd gone into agriculture. You're certain this wasn't a metaphor? Command asked. If it was, it needs a better publicist. Static crackled. We're escalating this. Please don't, I said. Escalation is how we end up with lasers and apologies. You are not authorized. I know, I said, story of my career. The channel cut. That was either very good or very bad. Historically, it leaned bad. I stood and resumed walking, letting the station decide where I was allowed to go next. It chose a transit ring leading toward the diplomatic quarter, which meant she was not done with me. I couldn't decide whether to feel honored or hunted. She was waiting again, this time not in a sealed chamber, but in a shared concourse designed to make species with incompatible anatomies feel equally uncomfortable. She stood near a refreshment unit, watching it dispense something viscous into a crystal container. When she noticed me, she lifted it slightly. "This is not blood," she said. "The warning labels are exaggerated." "I was going to ask," I said, "but I figured it was rude." She took a sip, eyes never leaving me. "You are avoiding me." I'm pacing myself. Humans do that when overwhelmed. Humans do that when offered unexpected reproductive alliances. She considered that. We do not often offer. Lucky me. She gestured toward an empty seat. I took it, because at this point resistance felt ceremonial. "Our people," she said, "have studied yours extensively. That's unsettling but not surprising. You are more chaotic than projected. Also accurate." She leaned back, ears angling slightly, a gesture I was starting to recognize as amusement. "You joke to regulate fear." "I joke because if I scream, someone calls security." She nodded, fair. For a moment, we sat watching beings of a dozen species negotiate food, data, and personal space. A pair of gelatinous traders argued softly over a holographic contract. A human diplomat pretended not to notice. "You are not required to answer immediately," she said. "That's generous. But time is not on our side." "When is it ever?" She turned toward me fully. "Tell me something, warrior. Why do you fight?" I blinked. That's a big question for a hallway. "Answer simply." I shrugged, "Because if I don't, someone else gets hurt." She absorbed that. "That aligns with our projections." "Do you ever get tired of projections?" I asked. "Of knowing the future so well it stops being interesting?" Her lips curved. "Prediction is not certainty, especially with humans." I grinned. "We do have a talent for ruining algorithms." She studied me again, longer this time. "Not as a threat, not as a resource, as a variable." "We will speak again," she said finally. I had a feeling. She moved away, melting into the station's flow, leaving behind the faint sense that something enormous had shifted direction, just slightly, in response to a conversation that had included jokes about blood drinks and android warnings. I watched her go, then looked down at my hands. They were steady. That surprised me. Somewhere between duty and survival, something unexpected had begun to grow, not an answer, not yet, but a possibility. And possibilities, I knew, were how wars ended or began all over again. The alert came without sirens, which was how I knew it mattered. Sirens were for panic. This was for decisions. The station's internal clock skipped a beat, corrected itself, and then quietly informed everyone that a stellar anomaly had decided to exist much closer than previously scheduled. I felt it before I saw any data. A pressure behind the eyes, the kind that reminded you space was not empty, just patient. My communicator lit up again, this time with no pretense of calm. "We're out of time," Command said. "The vampire fleets are mobilizing. So are ours." "Of course they are," I said. "Nothing brings people together like the possibility of being wrong. You need to answer the proposal." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "You say that like it's a multiple-choice test." "It is," Command said, "and every answer has casualties." I cut the channel before they could add percentages. The concourse was louder now, voices overlapping in a dozen frequencies. The station knew what was coming. Old structures always did. I moved through it with the strange calm that only arrived when everything else had already gone to hell. She found me this time. "You walk like someone who has reached a conclusion," she said, falling into step beside me as if we'd been doing this for years. "I walk like someone who knows running won't help." She glanced at my face. "That is human wisdom." Don't tell anyone. We have a reputation to maintain. We stopped at a viewport where the stars were misbehaving. Light bent the wrong way. Space folded like it had misplaced its instructions. The anomaly will destabilize 3 systems, she said, including yours. And yours. Yes. I looked at her. So this isn't just politics anymore. It never was, she said. Politics is how fear pretends to be rational. I laughed softly. You know where I come from. If someone asks you to have children during an extinction-level event, it's usually considered bad timing. She considered that. From my perspective, it is the only time it makes sense. We stood there while the universe threatened to tear itself into interesting shapes. My people won't accept this easily, I said, nor will mine. Good, I said. If everyone's uncomfortable, we're probably doing something right. Her ears shifted that almost smile again. You have changed. Occupational hazard. I turned to face her fully. Here's the thing. I spent my life following orders because someone had to. I told myself that was enough, that I didn't need to imagine anything beyond survival. And now, she asked, and now the universe is asking me to imagine a future where survival isn't the only metric. She watched me closely, not interrupting. I won't do this as a weapon, I said, not as leverage, not as a trophy alliance. I would not accept